There's a philanthropist. He's asking rich white people to pay reparations. That's right. Per Atlanta Black Star, New York philanthropist Ed Mitzen, author of Wealthy and White, Why Guys Like Me Have to Show Up and Step Up and Give Others a Hand Up, told CNN this week he was deeply moved by the ongoing legal plight of the last three living survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, leading him to donate $3 million in 2022 to help them. While he criticized public officials in Oklahoma for stalling compensation efforts, Mitzen called on other wealthy white Americans to contribute to reparations, citing the lack of action from state and federal governments. That is powerful. Here's the CNN interview about that.
I can't give them justice, but I can give them generosity.
Saratoga Springs millionaire Ed Mitzen decided to take reparations into his own hands after witnessing the legal struggle of three people who survived the 1921 Tulsa Massacre, all of them over 100 years old.
And it just made me angry. I was sitting there thinking, what happened to them is irrefutable. Whether or not it happened 102 years ago or 2 years ago, it happened. It's undeniable. And it felt to me like the government out there was trying to run the clock out on these folks. And I just felt like I'm in a position that I can make their lives a little bit better so that they know that whenever it's their time to leave this earth, they know that their families are a little bit better off today than they were yesterday.
I think a lot of people look at issues like reparations, they look at those issues as black issues.
Right.
You feel that they're not just black issues, these are American issues.
Absolutely. And I think that many folks fear that if other people rise up, that they're going to somehow get pushed down. And it's not a zero-sum game. If we can get everybody up the curve, we're a much better country for it. And I truly believe that it's our responsibility in the white community to look at ourselves and look at the advantages that we've had and try to give those same advantages to other people that have been left behind.
Yeah, I don't know why it's so hard for our federal government to act on what that last statement he just said. It's not like America doesn't have a history of reparations. There's just no history of reparations for black people. America helped set up the Nuremberg trials, right? America also paid Japanese Americans, rightfully so, for putting them in internment camps. So it's not like we don't have a history. We know what to do. It's just that we're not willing to do it. 2 years ago, Mitten's New York-based nonprofit Business for Good donated $1 million to each of the aging survivors. While no federal, state, or local government entities has still never paid a cent to the descendants of Tulsa victims whose entire livelihood were wiped out 100 years ago. The last three survivors, Viola Fletcher, who's 109 years old, wow. Leslie Benfield Randall, 108 years old, and Hugh Van Ellis Sr., who died in October at the age of 102, filed their initial reparation lawsuit in 2020, nearly a century after one of the worst episodes of racial violence in U.S. history. I need to stop and pause right here. People, the tragedy is, this is for a few reasons. I hate when people call Tulsa Black Wall Street. For anybody that know anything about Wall Street wealth, the name of Wall Street is where in New York, the first street, the original slave auctioning block was. So referring to what they were doing in Tulsa as something as exploitative as selling slaves is absolutely horrible to me. What Tulsa was, people 102 years, 103 years ago now, in the face of the most racist institutions, talking about America, was still finding a way to thrive. That's what Tulsa was. That was not Wall Street. That is still not Wall Street. Wall Street today is still about a grift. That is not what was happening with these people. They were building and created wealth by surviving up as a community. And Rayvon, I think it's important that we acknowledge that difference. And this is why I never refer to Tulsa as Black Wall Street or any of other communities throughout America that suffered the same tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely ignoring the history of what Wall Street is, and and even if you're just looking at modern Wall Street, it's a corrupt institution that has a pretty bad reputation, and so applying that nickname to it is just not accurate at all. I will say it's really sad that these victims had to live, and God bless. Hopefully, we all are able to live that long in our lives, but they had to live 100 years after that they suffered that horrific tragedy to get something out of it. And it wasn't even from the state. It wasn't from the government of this country. It was from one man who, happened to feel moved to, give back to them. And that's a tragedy. And, I'm glad that he's spreading this message. It's an objectively good thing, but it really does highlight that, there'll never be enough philanthropists to actively, enact reparations in the way that they need to be in this country. It has to come from the federal government. And as you pointed out, we know they can do it. They gave reparations in the past to the victims of Japanese internment, but they also gave reparations to slave owners in this country. But we can't give reparations to the actual victims of slavery and their descendants. And we know for a fact still suffer the repercussions and still feel the massive economic disparity and wealth disparity from as the direct result of slavery in this country. It should be a no-brainer, but the systemic racism runs so deep and it is ingrained, and the response to it is the pushback is always so stupid. I didn't own a slave, so why should I have to pay? Well, first of all, you as an individual white person in this country are not handing $20 to a black person. That's not what the reparations is. It's not what people are asking for. But also you have reaped benefits as a white person in this country from the system of slavery, particularly in, as he's pointing out, the wealthy white people in this country, most of them directly in their family lineage gained that wealth through the institution of slavery in this country, and to the detriment of Black Americans. And so that's a little bit of a different circumstance, but everyone's paying into taxes. You never complain about all the million other things that your tax dollars are going to, and it's not just, it's just such a dumb misunderstanding of what reparations is, but so to an issue that really should be a no-brainer. It is so obvious that we need to, this country needs to give reparations to the descendants of slaves. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just it's so absurd to me that people can't wrap their minds around how clear and obvious doing this should be, and how this is just a small way to start to right the wrong. This historic massive injustice, as you referred to it earlier in the show, America's original sin. It just blows my mind, the bad faith interpretations of the argument.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand interest. And if everybody can wrap their head around interest, then you understand how you benefited and how this country has set up Black people to fail and not have as much wealth as other folk, especially those slave owners. And I would say, as a good starting point for Black History Month for many people, you should really look at what Ravonna was talking about when she said slave owners were paid reparations, because every slave they lost, they definitely got money from the government about that. So Atlanta Black Star continued to cover this, and they said, modern courts have persistently denied any payouts to the descendants due to the long time that has passed since the massacre, as demonstrated in 2005 when the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear a reparations appeal from tussle victims. No other domestic nonprofit entity has ever stepped up on reparations in a big way like Mitten's have, with many conservative lawmakers wanting to turn the page on the country's racial or racist history. You can't turn the page on the racist history when we're still dealing with it. Atlanta Black Star continued and said, more than 20 years ago, Tulsa commissioned a study that determined more than 1,000 homes and businesses were destroyed as the Black financial district was ransacked, while the financial toll on the damages was estimated at $27 million in today's dollar. But when the 2020 case was reexamined through the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, it was too late, as the statute of limitation had passed for survivors to file a lawsuit against the state of Oklahoma. Black Star went on to say a new reparations lawsuit was filed in March 2021 and proceeded for more than 2 years before it was dismissed by a lower court last summer, prompting the appeal courts currently before the Oklahoma Supreme Court. The civil action named the city of Tulsa County Sheriff, county commissioners, and the Oklahoma Military Department of Defendants, or as defendants, sorry. And that, of course, like I said, was according to Black Star. Previously, Tulsa County District Court Judge Carolyn Wall allowed the lawsuit to move forward in 2022, but she dismissed the case in July 2023 after the city attorney successfully argued that simply by being connected to a historical event does not provide a person with unlimited rights to seek compensation from any project in any way related to that historical event. That is absolutely dumb as hell. And that is the logic that Ravana was talking about that makes no sense. That is this is a monetary thing. You took houses, land, and businesses. Being connected to that and it being taken illegally definitely entitles you and your family to that thing. This is ridiculous to me beyond belief. Atlanta Black Star went on to say that Wall talking about the judge, made the ruling despite the appeal, noting the advanced ages of the plaintiffs while asking the court to give the survivors an opportunity before they die. And there are no other survivors of the massacre to take the stand, take an oath, and tell an Oklahoma court what has happened to them, their families, and their community. The ruling by the state highest court will ultimately determine whether the case is sent back to Judge Wall for trial. Again, that's according to Atlanta Black Star. The lawsuit claims violation of Oklahoma's public nuisance laws, arguing that the legacy of the massacre still impacts the Black community after more than a century, and they should recover from an unjust enrichment others gain from. That's a legal term that we're going to ask Ravana to explain in a second. Illegal and unjust enrichment others gain from an exploitation of the massacre. Previously, Assistant Oklahoma Attorney General Kevin McClure disputed the claims in the current lawsuit, asserting that they were premised on conflicting historical facts. Conflicting historical facts. Are you kidding me? From over 100 years ago, and that the plaintiffs failed to properly allege how the Oklahoma Military Department created an ongoing public nuisance. Ravana, this is gaslighting, institutional gaslighting. And this is what we mean about systemic racism. When you act in this manner, when all of these actors play their role to continue 100+ year terror on these last three surviving, it is absolutely disgusting, but it's also as American as apple pie.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, just to show the bad faith interpretations and legal arguments that were presented and the decision by the judge, the argument that was presented was that this would be some sort of novel legal concept, that these individuals would be able to seek reparations for the injustice they suffered just because they had some connection to a historical event, and they claimed that it would be an unlimited right to do so, which is patently absurd. They weren't presenting a novel argument. They were seeking to be made whole for an injustice they suffered that inarguably, you can trace the unjust enrichment of the people who unjustly enriched themselves from the massacre, and you can trace how it affected these individuals detrimentally financially. And they did that. And they calculated that. This wasn't some far-reaching request. It wasn't, again, it would have been novel in rewarding reparations to Black Americans in this country, but it wasn't novel in the argument as it pertains to the law. This is how decisions are made every single day in courts as to financial restitution. So it is, and they rely on assuming that the people who are seeing this news won't know that information, and assuming that, when the story comes out, people will just accept the argument they presented as fact, but it's completely bad faith and just not accurate as to what they were requesting. So just despicable. I mean, I guess that's my word of the day with all these stories, but truly heinous stuff. And the system of our legal system itself, the history of its racism cannot be overstated. I mean, founded and steeped in racism.
Yeah, that's a fact. Like, let's just remind people real quick what we're talking about. The May 31st, 1921 massacre unfolded after a white mob falsely accused a young Black man of assaulting a white woman, leading to a confrontation that quickly escalated into bloodshed. The white mob, helped by the National Guard, attacked the prosperous Tulsa neighborhood of Greenwood and set it ablaze. As many as 300 Black citizens were reportedly killed and hundreds more injured. Nearly 10,000 people were left homeless amid the ruins of what happened or had been on one of the most profitable districts in the Midwest at the time. And Atlanta Black Star went on to say that in the years that followed, public officials sought to expunge any reference to the massacre in the city's historical record, while the survivors and their families never received a dime in compensation from the city or state The topic of reparation remains a hot issue among Democrats amid the 2024 race as President Joe Biden faced growing criticism for not taking any meaningful action on reparation since he took office more than 3 years ago, especially since he promised Black people on his last name that he would make it a priority. So that is a fact.